Today's reading is from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 16. When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of James and Salome brought spices so that they might come and anoint him. Very early on the first day of the week they came to the tomb when the sun had risen. They were saying to one another, "Who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance of the tomb?" Looking up, they saw that the stone had already been rolled away, although it was extremely large. Entering the tomb, they saw a young man sitting at the right, wearing a white robe, and they were amazed. And he said to them, "Do not be amazed. You are looking for Jesus the Nazarene, who has been crucified. He has risen. He is not here. Behold, here is the place where they laid him. But go, tell his disciples and Peter, he is going ahead of you to Galilee. There you will see him, just as he told you." They went out and fled from the tomb, for trembling and astonishment had gripped them. They said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. Some later manuscripts add verses 9 through 20. Now, after Jesus had risen early on the first day of the week, he first appeared to Mary Magdalene, from whom he had cast out 7 demons. She went and reported to those who had been with him while they were mourning and weeping. When they heard that he was alive and had been seen by her, they refused to believe it. After that, he appeared in a different form to 2 of them while they were walking along their way on the country. They went away and reported it to others, but they did not believe them either. Afterward, he appeared to the 11 themselves as they were reclining at the table, and he reproached them for their unbelief and hardness of heart, because they had not believed those who had seen him after he had risen. And he said to them, "Go into all the world and preach the gospel to all creation. He who has believed and has been baptized shall be saved, but he who has disbelieved shall be condemned. These signs will accompany those who have believed. In my name they will cast out demons. They will speak with new tongues. They will pick up serpents, and if they drink any deadly poison, it will not hurt them. They will lay their hands on the sick, and they will recover." So then, when Jesus had spoken to them, he was received up into heaven and sat down at the right hand of God. And they went out and preached everywhere, while the Lord worked with them and confirmed the words by the signs that followed. One thought. In verses 1 through 8, we see that the Gospel of Mark ends fairly abruptly and fairly surprisingly. Typically, after every resurrection appearance of Jesus, there seems to be a new boldness with the disciples, but Mark ends with them trembling, and they were gripped by fear. Now, there's another very hard issue in this chapter, because many Bibles have brackets around verses 9 through 20. And good Bible-believing scholars differ on whether verses 9 through 20 were originally part of Mark's gospel. This is a very difficult issue. It's related to the subject of what's called textual criticism. And so this is trying to uncover the original text of Scripture. We have manuscripts that get passed down through the generations, but we don't have the very first copies of the Gospel of Mark ever written anymore. We have copies of manuscripts that have come down through the centuries, and there are some difficult issues in there. Some important, very early manuscripts that were very close to the time of Jesus, they don't have these verses. Yet other manuscripts, in fact, the majority of New Testament manuscripts, which are later, have these verses, and many second century Christians also cite these verses. So how should we think about this issue? Well, I think we need to come to Scripture and receive it as it is, not as we want it to be. God has preserved his word. He is a speaking God, and he wants us to know him, and he's enshrined it in the Scriptures, this message of who he is and what he's done. He, for some reason, chose not to remove all the difficulties from the Bible. There are some hard passages, some hard things to understand, and some hard textual critical issues, like here in Mark, verses 9 through 20, actually part of the original gospel. We just have to take this on faith, trusting that God has preserved his word, and understand that we need to focus on what we know. And what we know for sure is that originally, verses 1 through 8, it's indisputable, they were originally part of the gospel. So that's where I think the majority of our focus when we're trying to learn about God from this chapter, learn about Christ, learn about who we are and the response he wants from us, I think we should place most of our attention on verses 1 through 8. So I just want to focus there. And what we see here is that the disciples come to the tomb, they don't find Jesus, and they go away from the tomb. It says in verse 8, they fled, for trembling and astonishment had gripped them, and they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. I read a really good quote about this passage, and it says that verse 8 shows us that the resurrection does not magically dispel fear and cowardice, but faithful discipleship involves following Jesus, not contemplating doing so. Faithful discipleship means acting courageously on Jesus' behalf, not standing on the sidelines and watching. And I think that's such a good way to conclude this gospel, because this gospel begins with a call. If you remember back to chapter 1, Jesus calls his first disciples and says, "Follow me." And now it ends, I think, with an implied challenge from Jesus. This implied challenge, I think Jesus is saying something akin through this text to us, saying, will you push past your fears and follow me? Will you trust my word, trust in my resurrection, and overcome your fears and follow me? And how you answer that question is going to determine how closely you follow Jesus.